Batman Arkham Shadow is out, and I'm excited to finally be discussing a new Arkham game. 5 years ago, I started this channel with the intention of primarily covering Arkham games, but little did I know that the release cycle between games would inflate from every 2 years to every decade. Sure, we had Gotham Knights, a game with such low community interest that I ended up in algorithm jail when nobody would watch my content on it. Then we got Suicide Squad, a game almost unanimously considered a flop on every conceivable level. That's why I find myself really engaged with what Camouflage has delivered, a more traditional Arkham game in a less traditional format, VR. VR isn't my preferred method of gaming, but at the end of the day, a good game is a good game, and I really respect Camouflage for their commitment to bringing the Arkham formula to new hardware. This is going to be an interesting review, because I have not yet played Batman Arkham Shadow. I was going to meet up with Slickmoth and Salvage to tag team the game, but plans fell through at the last minute, and that was just due to unforeseen circumstances, so while we do plan to meet up at a later date, I am left with the decision to either buy a MetaQuest 3 or just watch a playthrough on YouTube. $300 is a good chunk of change, but watching YouTube is free. And still not being entirely sold on the current lineup of VR games outside of Arkham Shadow, I picked the latter. As such, I will not be reviewing the gameplay, graphics, or other technical features of the game because my assessment of them is not sufficient. What I will be covering is the story. And I'll start by giving some non-spoiler thoughts, and later I will dive into spoilers, but don't worry, I will give a warning before I do. Also, if you are interested in hearing some reviews from people who actually played the game, I have linked a few below. Batman Arkham Shadow is a direct sequel to 2013's Batman Arkham Origins. I was surprised at just how many Easter eggs and cameos referenced the previous events of the lore. Many voice actors from previous Arkham games appeared as well. Troy Baker returns as Harvey Dent, Tara Strong is back as Harley Quinn Harleen Quinzel, and Mark Rolston, the former voice of Deathstroke, plays Commissioner Gordon this time around. Also, Elijah Wood, known for a small indie fantasy film trilogy, plays Jonathan Crane. Very well, I might add. He does a great job. But the real standout here is Roger Craig Smith. Arkham Shadow asks a lot of Smith, and he delivers. There is a lot more range to Batman than we've seen in previous games, and Smith knocks it out of the park. I found the narrative to be fairly solid as well. Do I think it's better than what's come before? Not necessarily. I certainly found it more engaging than the plot of Suicide Squad or Gotham Knights, and there are some genuinely fantastic moments. But still, in my opinion, it never quite reaches the heights of any of the previous console-bound games. I could see others feeling differently if the story resonates with them on a deeper level, but personally, I just found the pacing of the story to be bloated, and I found the execution of some key events lacking. In the 7 to 10 hour runtime of Batman Arkham Shadow, I would say there are around 3 hours of top-tier Arkham narrative content. Unfortunately, it's all spaced out between red herrings, fetch quests, and filler. I found the main mystery of the game to be rather predictable, which is too bad because it comprises the majority of the game. I'm not saying the moment-to-moment experience is boring, but I wish there was more going on at any given time. Even some of the big moments of Arkham Shadow feel oddly executed due to the limited technical capacity of the experience. Luckily, none of these criticisms are enough to deny the fact that Camouflage developers are clearly huge Batman fans, and by extension, Arkham fans. Now comes perhaps what will be my most controversial take. I don't think all the connections to Arkham in Arkham Shadow feel completely earned. Some of the lore additions feel like a stretch when trying to reconcile them into the larger Arkhamverse, and some of the character arcs feel somewhat unmotivated, with characters making decisions because the plot needs them to, rather than it being an authentic decision that it feels like they would make. Again, none of this is completely immersion-breaking, and on the whole, Arkham Shadow presents another compelling origin story. There's just a few things that didn't quite land for me. I can't really elaborate without going into spoilers, so if you have not played the game and don't want it spoiled, click away now. I'll be spoiling the game in 3, 2, 1. Alright, still here? Okay, let's go. The game opens with you playing as some criminal named Malone who vandalizes the bat signal and is taken to Blackgate. We cut to earlier in the night when Batman was investigating the Rat King. Who is he? What does he want? Questions that will be asked for the entirety of the game. As Batman works his way through the sewers, we get a chance to see just how established these rats are. They are digging passageways through Gotham, and even digging into banks to steal wealth. Batman works with Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Dent while on the tail of Shrike, one of the rats. Barbara Gordon shows up wanting to help, but Batman tells her to go home. There were also some newspaper clippings implying that another Bat-themed vigilante was in Gotham, so I was hoping that Barbara would be revealed as Batgirl later in the game. She doesn't. Instead, she becomes Oracle, which left me slightly underwhelmed, but it's not the end of the world. You know, maybe we will get another flat-screen game at some point that builds upon the dual-play mechanic of Arkham Knight, where we can play with Batgirl and Robin. But anyway, let's continue. Batman goes to Monarch Theater, where his parents were murdered. Alfred asks him if he's okay, and he's clearly not, but he keeps going. He learns that Harvey Dent and Leslie Tompkins have been taken hostage, and Batman loses it. Alfred tells him to calm down as he punches his way toward the courthouse. It shows us that Batman's arc in Arkham Shadow is one of overcoming anger. While I can buy that Batman is becoming more and more angry the longer he continues his vengeful crusade, I can't help but feel like we are exploring charted territory. Arkham Origins featured a very similar character arc for Batman, so to see him a few months later with an insatiable temper feels a bit unearned. Still, it's a really effective character arc, so I'm willing to look past it. I'm willing to just acknowledge that as Batman evolves, so does his temper, and it's just something that continues to be a stumbling block that he has to overcome. Next comes a really clever fake out where you think Harvey is going to become Two-Face, but Batman saves him just in time. It was pulled off very well. Shrike leaps to his death, making it look like Batman pushed him, and Batman realizes he won't be able to get information on the Rat King as a vigilante, so he disguises himself as a criminal named Malone, vandalizes the bat signal, and is thrown into Blackgate. It was a really cool structural decision to show this as the opening scene of the game, because it just adds more mystery to the very opening, and it's a cool payoff when you find out what really happened. And really, the whole opening is fantastic. The locations that they picked in Gotham were really cool, and it was an engaging opening to the story. Once you get to Blackgate, you spend days wandering the prison as Bruce Wayne by day, and prowling the halls as Batman by night. They even introduce a Telltale-style choice system, and while it doesn't really seem to influence the story, it at least gives the player something to do during the conversations. The game has combat and stealth that many have praised, and again, I haven't been able to experience it yet, but it sounds really satisfying. And it also leans into the strengths of VR by giving us many detective segments where we get to solve crimes and inspect the environment. While I don't think Blackgate is as interesting of an environment as Arkham Asylum, it was cool to get a deep dive into Gotham's second most famous criminal holding facility. I was consistently pleasantly surprised by familiar faces that showed up too. Bird, Bane's lieutenant, is here, Ferris Boyle, Harleen Quinzel, and Jonathan Crane. The ventriloquist makes an appearance, as does Otis Flanagan, and Alfred is frequently on comms to lead the way. Carmine Falcone is one of the game's primary antagonists, and man, it was cool to finally see this guy in an Arkham game. He was done perfectly, in my opinion. The voice, the character model, the motivations, it all felt distinct from what we've seen with the Reeves and Nolan cinematic takes on the character, but it still feels just as iconic. And let's be honest, it wouldn't be an Arkham game without Joker. Camouflage was very smart to make his role a cameo rather than a secret main villain reveal, and Joker even pokes fun at the expectation we all had that he'd play a bigger role in the story. He says something along the lines of like, "The first rule of comedy is you never repeat a gag," or something like that. It was pretty funny. But like I mentioned before, I think many of these terrific elements were watered down by the often uneventful story. In the first half of the game especially, even the cool moments often feel like they are just killing time, because we know that they're not going to reveal who the Rat King is until the end of the game. I just wish there was more going on. The best moments of Arkham Shadow are when they play with the premise of Bruce Wayne pretending to be Malone behind bars. The voice Roger Craig Smith does for Malone is so good. It's funny, but not out of character. Bruce interacting with Harleen the therapist and Joe the trustee in such a different way than he normally does was a fresh coat of paint on this world. Scenes like the group therapy session where Bruce, Joe, and the ventriloquist are being treated by Harleen and Crane was brilliant, and I wish there were more scenes like that. Nonetheless, getting to see the broken justice system of Gotham at play was an amazing idea. Over the course of the story, Bruce has some flashbacks revealing that he and Harvey Dent are best friends from childhood. This is one of those lore additions that I really like. I like seeing Harvey's backstory, and I like seeing Bruce have a personal connection to him. My problem is that the games later in the Arkham chronology don't really support this addition. In the Arkham City interview tapes, for example, Harvey mentions disliking Wayne, and if he'd been best friends since childhood, I feel like Hugo Strange probably would have taunted Dent with that fact. Speaking of which, let's discuss the ending. Bruce has a Scarecrow nightmare where he is faced with the dark, angry version of himself. It provides an amazing reflected character arc. While Harvey is succumbing to his shadow, Bruce is overcoming his own. Then, Bruce, as Malone, is taken to the courthouse for a pre-trial, as he is the prime suspect now of the Rat King case. This is the scene that I was mainly talking about when I brought up awkward staging at certain critical scenes. Jonathan Crane, for some reason, takes out a gas canister and starts self-medicating, then decides he wants to share some with Malone. As he randomly decides to drug Malone in front of a judge, the district attorney, and the police commissioner, Malone, Bruce, pushes the canister away, and somehow it breaks open and spills all over Harvey, melting half of him, and thus Two-Face is born. Crane jumps back and starts acting like, "Bro, Malone did what? Did you guys see that? It was all him!" As if he had nothing to do with it. And everyone just goes with it. Like, Commissioner Gordon and Dent are, like, freaking out, and it's all clearly Malone's fault somehow. It just doesn't make tons of sense. Dent swears revenge on Malone, not Falcone, not Batman, Malone. So I'm not sure why he later in the chronology randomly blames Batman, who is not even present at the hearing. I'm just not sure why he is later inclined to work with Scarecrow either, after he is responsible for scarring his face. In later games, it is made clear that Harvey believed Falcone was the direct cause of his disfiguration, but by Arkham Shadow's logic, Falcone is like not even a B-tier suspect. This was clearly an accident involving chemicals that Crane should not have had in the courtroom. It's not like there's any wiggle room for the possibility that Falcone smuggled acid in for Malone to throw at him. The whole scene feels very forced and doesn't feel like an authentic setup for Harvey's motivations later in the story. Maybe Camouflage will flesh it out in a sequel, but for now, I'm just not satisfied with it. Harvey is also revealed as the Rat King, and I've already seen a number of people getting pissed about this and calling it a lazy reveal, but I honestly think it's kind of a cool idea. I liked the foreshadowing at the beginning, Dent's campaign posters written over with the word Rodent. It was a clever play on his name. And also, Dent does have a history of having alternate personas who act independently, like the Judge from the animated series. Him being a rat-themed villain is a little strange, but the twist of him being the surprise villain works for me, especially because it feels like an empowered version of his hatred toward things as Harvey Dent. He is frustrated with the corruption in the police department, and so the Rat King calls it the pigsty. He's frustrated with the corruption among city officials, and he's frustrated with Falcone and how Falcone gets off easily, and so those are all his targets. I think it works for this story and this world, and so I'm pretty empathetic to that plot twist. Next, you confront Dent, who has captured your friend Joe. It's Joe Chill, the man who murdered your parents. I saw this coming, but it was still a well-done reveal. Batman urges Harvey to let Chill go and unmasks himself. Chill apologizes. He's clearly shaken by this, and Batman lets him go. He has overcome his anger and now just wants to help his friend. Harvey is left confused, overcome by his dissociative identity disorder and PTSD. Batman and Harvey fall off the building, and Bruce later visits Harvey as he recovers. Now, I thought the sequence was really cool. It was an amazing Batman moment, where he's literally defending the man who murdered his parents. The reason that he started his whole vengeful crusade was arguably to catch this guy. He has him in front of him and he lets him go because he's overcome his anger. At the same time, as cool as this moment is, it doesn't really fit in the Arkhamverse, considering Harvey Dent doesn't know Batman's identity in future games. But don't worry guys, Camouflage had one more infuriating twist for us. Amnesia. Just like Bane in Batman Arkham Origins. At this rate, if someone makes an Arkham Knight sequel, I wouldn't put it past them to explain that after the Nightfall Protocol, everyone in the world just conveniently forgot Batman's identity. It was a cop-out in Arkham Origins, but a forgivable one. Bane acts super stupid in the Rocksteady games, and so even though it was a cop-out, it worked. It barely worked, but it worked. I'm sorry, Camouflage, but I do not buy it a second time, especially for a character who canonically has a memory of his past and even of the day that he was scarred. There's no precedent for him to have memory issues, so I just don't buy it. It's a cop-out. Honestly, I think this is a compelling take on Two-Face's origin, but maybe it should have been in a rebooted continuity so that this consequence of Two-Face knowing Batman's identity could have lasted longer and could have been used in more interesting ways, rather than just being immediately forgotten in order to fit within the Arkham universe. Overall, though, Arkham Shadow has some great moments. It also has some weak moments, but the good outweighs the bad. I think we're left the best story in a DC game in almost a decade. Camouflage did a great job, and I think if they make a sequel, we'll see an even more refined story with evolved gameplay. And as a standalone experience, I really like the characterization of Harvey Dent and his connection to Bruce Wayne here. I just don't know that it fits as well in the Arkhamverse as they would like us to believe. I also really hope to see more DC games in the near future, and yes, that includes more Arkham games. Especially in the Origins corner of the universe, I'd really like to see more games voiced by Roger Craig Smith. Let me know what you thought of the story in Arkham Shadow, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.